Scott, the second time that we get to talk about DaBaby on this opus of Trilloquy. I'm sure you didn't think that was coming, huh?
No, and the first time that I heard about this artist was in Detroit during the Sphinx conference.
And here we are again. Let's get into it. I'm Garrett McQueen.
I'm Scott Blankenship.
And this is Trilloquy, true and real stories from the fringes of classical music. The first opus of Trilloquy for Women's History Month. So happy Women's History Month. A great time to explore some of today's and some of the past's really important women, both in and outside of classical music. We have two really important women on today's opus of Trilloquy, Katie Brown and Dalanie Harris, hosts of the Classically Black podcast. We recorded this conversation last month when the both of us were in Detroit for the Sphinx conference. So looking forward to sharing that conversation with you. But I wanted to open up this opus of Trilloquy by shouting out a couple of women composers. You know, there are names that have become more popular these days, like Clara Schumann or the late great Florence Price. But there are still multitudes of women composers, both living and gone, who don't always, you know, as we say, get their flowers, who we don't always celebrate as much as we do some of the others. Are there any women composers that come to mind when you think about those overshadowed traditionally?
Yeah, and she's alive, Dobrinka Tabakova. Okay, and she has a cello concerto that is amazing, and that is kind of the extent of what we've got. And she's got other stuff out there that's just as gorgeous, and she writes in a way that is fresh but also seems familiar.
Yeah. That cello concerto, I think I've said here on the podcast before, was actually a part of my very first broadcast ever. So, you know, she's also
That's right. Yeah.
a really important composer to me as well. And, and again, her music really just speaks for itself. So for me, a composer that I would really like to shout out is Jessie Montgomery, and her name is becoming more and more popular. You know, making the circles these days. A living composer, a young living composer. She's about my age, based in New York, a violinist, member of the Catalyst Quartet, and for me, her music just has a lot of that bright, really fresh feeling to it. We actually, I've known Jessie for a while now. You met Jessie at Sphinx last month, maybe shortly after we recorded the conversation with Katie and Dalanie.
It was just after.
Yeah. She's just a really incredible contemporary figure in every way. You know, it's easy for us to put composers up on this pedestal and, they, spend all day, at the writing desk or not being bothered. But, Jessie Montgomery, as much as she writes some really incredible music, she's a partier. She knows how to have fun. And it's really a joy to get to share some of her music, both when we talk here on Trilloquy and when we put music on the radio. A piece of music of hers that I think everyone should know is called Starburst. It's for string orchestra, but again, it just has that really bright, exciting feel to it that you can't really get anywhere else. So between Dobrinka Tabakova and Jessie Montgomery, those are two living women composers. As I said earlier, there are a multitude of women composers from days, decades, centuries past that deserve attention. So I invite you to really do some research. Even just Googling women composers, might open you up.
There's another one that I'd like to shout out
Sure.
because in this conversation with Katie and Dalanie, we get into some of the segments, how they might drag a composer.
Sure.
And when they shouted out Devon Russell Gray, they were talking about Debussy, and sort of everything wrong around Debussy.
Yeah.
Well, it was Devon Russell Gray that turned me on to Anna Thorvaldsdóttir.
Oh,
So if
yeah.
you want something that's a little bit more raucous, something that's going to challenge you a little bit more, I would look into Anna Thorvaldsdóttir as well.
So as we transition into our conversation with Katie and Dalanie, I just want to acknowledge that it's really an honor for me as a male podcaster and a man in the field of classical music to really give space to folks like Katie and Dalanie. They were actually featured in Opus 2 of Trilloquy, actually the very first conversation that I recorded, so they are a foundational part of what we do, and it's really my honor to offer their very genuine and very authentic perspectives. Pretty early in the conversation, you'll hear Katie say that the two genres of music that she's most closely connected to is gospel and rap.
Right.
And when you ask Katie and Dalanie about the rap music they listen to these days, they're always bringing up DaBaby. We excerpted a bit of his music. I think maybe a couple opuses ago, a song called Bop. I found a really cool piano arrangement of another tune by DaBaby called Shut Up. It's a piano arrangement by Michael Mattis, and I think that we can just take a quick listen to that as we transition into this conversation with Katie Brown and Dalanie Harris from the Classically Black podcast. It is what it is. It's we're gonna do sort of a recap. It's been a year since we all been here convened, and definitely want to hear about how Classically Black is going and how your careers outside of the podcast world are going. But one of the things that I was really eager to talk to y'all about was maintaining chemistry. So when it comes to classical music and building yourself up and all that, from the most part, it's just you in the practice room. You have you and your instrument to deal with. But when it comes to podcasts, classical music podcasts, or whatever you're trying to do, you have to maintain a certain rapport with your co-host. And, sometimes things can be challenging or whatever. But, I think as long as the lines of communication are open, everything is good. I feel like we communicate okay.
It's gotten to the point where, we're on the same page all the time. But there was some fumbling around when we first started.
Okay, so what you mean by that?
What do I mean by some fumbling around?
I'll ask y'all this, okay? Between the two of you, who is the texter and who is the one that just does not respond to the texts?
Oh, here we go.
Do we have that problem?
We have other problems.
Yeah, we have other problems.
Yeah.
Let's get into it.
I don't know. Like we have different ways of storing information. Like Katie loves her notes app.
Oh, I love the notes app.
And then she'd be like, "You didn't see I updated in the note." I'm like, "Katie, I can't see. I can't see the notes app in your phone. You have to put it in the shared Google Doc that we can both see."
Yeah.
But I'm like, the way my brain works, like my mind is always going. Like I be scrolling through social media, I'm like, "Oh, that'll be a great intermission," or "Oh, that'll make a great episode topic, so I just put it in my phone. So it's like for me to have to go all the way to the Google, and I'm not like a really organized person, like not 100 in different ways in other areas of my life, but like not in this. It's like that Google Drive junk. Like I finally figured out how to put our episode. You see how good I got at that? Like I can put the episode template in the episode folder, like that. You know, I'm really proud of that.
Yeah, Google Drive is our thing. That's where we keep everything.
Everything is in Google Drive.
I mean, got the 99 cent a month, 100 gigs and everything.
See, I think the thing that Garrett and I wrestle with is I've been at APM for 13 years, and I'm part of the process. You know, I know how I know how the workflow goes. Garrett came from a small station where his hands were in every part of the project, and if it didn't line up, then Garrett was like, "What is going on in this? What is going on with the process?"
I'll stay mad at somebody.
Are you still mad at me?
No, I'm not mad at you anymore. But all I'm saying is that the frustration is when I know that I could do something exactly how I want it to be done, and it's not done that way because somebody else is doing it. I can't help but to feel frustrated because I'm like, well, I could have done it. You know, if you're not going to upload the whatever, or you're not going to anyway. I'm not. None of this is shade. None of these are subtweets, Scott. I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying in general. So for folks who may not know what Classically Black is, how would you describe that podcast?
I think it's the most informal approach to classical music you could probably get.
Okay.
I think that's a good way.
Yeah. It's like, you know, a little bit of humor. Me and Katie don't write jokes. We don't try to be funny. We just say things from our perspective, which is sometimes a little...
Funny in itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of people are like, yeah, I never thought of it that way. Like, it's just people, I feel like, take classical music really, really, really seriously all the time.
All the time. That's the thing. It's the all the time part.
Yeah, it's all the time because also like we don't want to give across, and I don't feel like we do come across as though we're not serious classical musicians, because at the same time, like Katie and I have things that we don't play about. Like if Katie's like, oh, I can't record at this time, like I must practice. Of course, I'm not gonna be like, man, what that Watson doing for you? Like I'm not about to do all that. I'm like, oh, you must practice. Like you have an audition coming up, something like that. But
yeah, I think we just try to approach it like we just want to make it as accessible as possible. And I think, to be frank, I think the majority of our listeners are classical musicians.
Sure.
However, like I think for the people that I know that do listen to it that are not classical musicians, I don't think they feel lost. I feel like because everything's a joke, not everything, like, but everything's like ha ha ha, and like even if we're really serious, we bring it back around. So it's like you can follow, and it's like I think the place we're coming from about being black in the profession, a lot of people can relate to being black in something or being othered in something. So it's like it doesn't. If you are related to us or you're close to us and you're not a classical musician, then you can still listen to Classically Black.
Yeah, and the comparisons that we make too, like we've had classical musicians DM us and be like, "Who's DaBaby?" Like, so it's both sides.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I missed that.
Remember Joseph Conyers? He was like, "Whose baby are they talking about?"
Joseph Conyers didn't know who DaBaby is.
Yeah,
he doesn't know who DaBaby is.
So we were like, we're like on two different sides. Like there are people that may not listen to classical music. They're like, so who is Wagner? And then other people who are like, who is DaBaby? Who is Offset? Like, so.
But that's interesting because I feel like those same considerations aren't put into play when someone goes to a concert and they see, a symphony that has 4 movements that say allegro, andantino, lento, vivace or whatever, like that can be as isolating, and no one's really apologizing for that, but I don't. So that's why I feel like we shouldn't apologize for, I don't know, some of the references and some of the things that we talk about. One of our challenges, Scott, is, making sure that we aren't leaving people behind. And, with Trilloquy, we're always trying to make it to where anybody can relate. So we talk about classical music, of course, but we talk about a lot of non-classical music, and I think that is equally important.
To.
And it's also, in my opinion, validating all music as equally important and equally artistic, and all of that.
I think Dalanie and I have been pretty clear about our stance with classical music. I mean, Dalanie, I think you actually really listen to classical music a lot, but I find myself like like I heard Misty Copeland say something that I really resonated with, and she was like, when I'm doing ballet, it's like ballet, ballet, ballet. But when I leave the studio, it's like I'm not thinking about ballet at all. And and for a long time I felt guilty about like not wanting to listen to classical music. I've been doing it all day. I practiced diligently. So it's like I kind of want to, when I step away from that, like I wasn't raised listening to classical music. You know, gospel and like rapper, that's what I listen to.
Gospel and rap.
Gospel and rap. So I think when we and then you listen to a lot of old, it's not oldies, right? What is it?
Like R&B,
soul. So like we bring these influences in. So it's like we just did an intermission where it was like, okay, to our Valentine's Day episode where it was like, okay, give me 3 pieces that are inspired by love, but give me 3 of your favorite love songs. And it was like, so we're always bringing in these influences of what we actually listen to. So it doesn't really matter where you're coming from listening to our podcast. It's like there's something you could grab onto because we're not strictly classical musicians. It's not just classical music all the time. Like that's all we talk about.
Yeah. So twice now that you've mentioned intermission, and that's of course a part of each episode of Classically Black. How about you take us through an episode? You know, what's sort of the format that you go for?
So first we have an intro, which is never scripted. Usually it's just like a, hey, how you doing? Like, just so we don't jump right into the show. Usually if it's like a holiday, we'll acknowledge that or something. Then we have the news segment, which I sometimes joke. I'm like, every day's a slow news day. But in classical music, Katie's like, who string popped this time? Sometimes it'd be like that.
But sometimes
Who died?
Like
Or that,
sometimes. And then, so I do the news. What's after the intermission?
It's intermission after the And the funny thing is, like, we be acting like it's episode 1 every time. We be like, so how do you start? How do you press record? It's honestly, every time it's like that. It's crazy. We'll be like, how do you add another, what's called it? The thing? See?
Y'all don't even know. But to be fair, I don't know either. I mean, Scott does all our button pushing and mixing and everything. Don't give it to me.
Well, you two working on your own has to be really freeing because Garrett and I have layers of management that we have to answer to.
And they don't let me say they don't let me say or they don't let me say any of these damn cuss words.
None of them.
So all that's gonna be edited out.
It'll be some bassoon bleeps over probably.
I love that. When I saw that, I was like,
Got to do something.
But no, what Scott is touching on is, how in many ways we're just limited because of the organization that we belong to. But it must be so freeing to produce a podcast and not have to worry about, who doesn't want to hear what you have to say or whatever.
I'm curious about like if you were to get like some crappy email or somebody DMs you some insults or something. What is because we're supposed to always take the high road. We're supposed to be
Supposed to.
That's what I said. We're supposed to take. We're not supposed to engage. We're supposed to demur. So I want to know how you guys handle the crappy DMs and the nasty emails.
Do y'all even get them?
we never got anything that is overtly negative.
Oh, so y'all get some shade.
Well, I need to rewind this and restart, I guess.
Yeah, we got some people. Yeah, I feel like the person actually that's most openly critical of the podcast to my face is actually my mother.
Oh, really?
Yes, because that's just the type of person that she is. Like, she'd be like, well, people might get offended if you say that. And I'm like, they can stay mad. Like, that's pretty my,
They can put a fermata over that mad.
Right? Period. Because that's one thing. No matter what we say on the show, Katie and I never put out an episode where like, oh, we shouldn't have said that or we shouldn't have done it. Like, I stand, like, anything I say on the show, somebody can bring it back to my face and I'll stand behind it.
Yeah, I'll probably double down on it. Yeah. Especially like, there's some episodes where we like had to say some difficult stuff. Like, we did an episode on Black achievement in classical music and like why classical music looks the way it looks. I mean, like, we have to have that conversation, and it's like, all right, let's talk about it. And I think, but to be fair, even though there's no one listening to our stuff before we put it out, unless it's a sponsorship, we still have things that we can't say just in good taste.
Yeah, that we've agreed that we will not say on the show.
Like, even now, probably until Dalanie graduates, we have a disclaimer that this doesn't represent Eastman in any way or whatever. Like, just things like, a lot of times if we accidentally say, like, if a friend of mine has inspired something, then if I accidentally say their name, we will go back and just take it out. Or like,
Yeah, how much editing do you do?
honestly, not a lot.
We've been trying to keep it like that.
Not a lot.
We've been trying to not take out too much stuff.
It's mostly just if we make a mistake. We don't like, because a prime example is when we had our friend Richard on, his episode was over 2 hours long, which is by far our longest episode. And Katie was like, are you going to take like some of the filler out? And I'm like, I don't even know. Like, I'm not an editing guru, so I don't even know like how people edit just portions that are like not needed. Like, so I was like, no, like it's that's the type, we're a conversational show, so I'm gonna just leave everything in unless it's like a big silence or like we say something and we're like, oh, I don't want to put that out.
Yeah, and that's kind of, when you mention length, we Scott and I try to keep it at an hour, but
Concepts.
but
Tell us more.
Well, but a lot
she's
of people,
turning it.
but a lot of people would argue that is even too long. And my argument is that in the world of podcasting and podcast culture and the podcast that we're trying to, sit among, they'll do 2, sometimes 3 hours. One of the main podcasts I listen to comes out twice a week, and those average about 3 hours. Yeah, the Joe Budden podcast. Shout out to them.
Still making that podcast? I'm sorry. I'm not coming for your fame.
Yeah, I mean, no, say what you want to say, but I mean, but not just them. We both listen to the read.
Yes.
We all listen to the read, and that one, I think the last one of those was over 2 hours. They
be playing all the time because that's how an hour and 30 minutes. I'm like, are y'all for real?
Right.
But I'm used to listening, and also the read was my first podcast, so I have that gauge of like, this is how long. Like, I listened to a show called The Love Hour, and I was like, it was over in an hour, and I was every week I'm like, why is it so short? And then I was like, it's called The Love Hour, Katie. So like, but I've had people come up to me like, I want to listen to your podcast because it's so long, and I feel like if you're not into podcasting, if you're not like used to turning it on when you're on a road trip or having it in the background when you're cleaning and cooking, then it's like that seems long to you.
Yeah.
Me and Radar around the lake every day.
Yeah.
Almost 2 hours. That's all my listening right there.
And see, and I put in my AirPods when I get off the air from the radio, and every day I have a podcast to listen to. Y'all come out on Monday, the read come out on Tuesday, Joe Budden on Wednesday. On Thursday I catch up on all the Breakfast Club. Friday I forget what I listen to on Friday. Saturday is Joe Budden. Again, and I forget how. I think I first started getting into podcasts. On the road. I used to live in Memphis, but play in the Detroit Symphony. So I was, making an 11-hour drive twice a week. That's when I think I was listening to the Nerdist podcast at that point, and that's just how I got into the concept of it. I'm wondering how the two of you would convince someone to listen, not to just your podcast, but to give the world of listening to podcasts a try. How would you try to get folks into doing that? I mean, because there's a podcast for every little single thing,
See, that's the
these
thing.
days.
I think you should find like a Google search, and it's like thinking about like what your interests are, and then finding a podcast that fits that, and then like, do the people that are speaking on the podcast, do you like their energy? Do you like the structure of the show? Like, honestly, like, not to keep bringing up the read, but when I listened to the read for the first time, because one of my teachers from undergrad, one of my VO teachers from undergrad mentioned, like, she listens to podcasts. I'm like, podcasts? Like, what is that even? She's like, oh, it's like a radio show, whatever. So I'm like, I'll have so much respect for her, but I know we're not listening to the same podcast.
Sure.
So I was like, okay, I Googled, I'm like, podcasts for Black women. And the read was one of the podcasts that came up, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a shot. And as soon as their intro hits came on the beat dropped, I was like, okay, so let's see what it's
so
about.
this is what we doing, okay.
And then they were talking about topics that I like saw in the Shade Room, and they were giving this perspective, and they were like opening my eyes to thinking about topics in a way that I would have never even dreamed. And then the listener letters are messy. I was like, this is my podcast. So it's like when it comes out and it's like a 3-hour episode, I was like, oh great, It's also you don't sit down and be like, all right, time for my podcast.
That's what I was gonna say. You gotta like find where in your day if podcast would fit in. Like, people think like, okay, I'm sitting down, I'm listening to the podcast, and I'm staring at the wall, and it's like, like you're driving, you're cleaning, washing the dishes,
passive listening. You're scrolling through social media.
When
I
walk to class,
like
when I'm trying, like, I just got the music history, now I gotta switch my brain to whatever. I'll just listen to the read in the middle.
My combo is podcast Candy Crush.
See,
podcast, Candy Crush, cocktail, bed. if all of those things are happening, I'm good to go. Can't nobody bother me. I wonder if there's some parallels there between getting folks into podcasting or listening to podcasts and getting folks into classical music, because that can also be a long form, art form in a way. But again, I'm not just going to sit down, stare at the wall, and listen to a symphony either. I feel like we can't pretend like folks are. I mean, some folks really are centered in. I feel like I'm centered in a way, but again, there's a feeling that's connected to listening to the podcast and really feeling like you're in on the conversation with these people.
Yeah.
In some cases, feeling like you know them.
Yeah.
I mean, this is Scott. This is your first time meeting Katie and Dalanie, and I'm sure you kind of feel like you know who you're talking to.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and I have to say, this is no joke. If I'm ever in a foul mood, I hear you two laugh, and it lightens things. I like to listen to you two laugh. But I do have a question about like features. Do you drag a composer every episode?
No. Right? No.
Okay, because recently you shouted out Devon, and he was listening to you guys with Debussy, and he was kind of like, agreeing. Mm-hmm. And there was the Strauss episode, right?
I would
Okay,
drag
so that happened
He
right around
dragged
the
himself
time.
with his own actions.
That's true.
We didn't say nothing.
Composers self-drag.
We're just the messengers.
Yeah. I feel like Debussy came up a bunch of times. I feel like
we're gonna leave him alone.
we have to leave him alone.
What don't you like about Debussy? Is it a personal thing or is it a music thing?
No, although there are personal things to be upset with Debussy about, it's not a personal thing. I just don't like
his
it.
music.
I just don't like it.
I feel lost on the
Yeah.
downbeat if there's one. It's
Right.
like
You said if there is one.
It just is. It's like you just go on a concert and the music is happening.
it doesn't sound. I can't think of one piece I like by it.
I don't know. I'm a bass player. I need rhythm. Like, I don't know.
And everything's all fa. It's just really like not my thing.
Yeah.
If you want me to listen, I can settle with Ravel.
Yeah, Ravel. He has some stuff for me.
Yeah, and I'm perfecting Daphnis and Chloe right now, and it's like, oh, this is not. Yeah, I mean, because it has to be in tune. And I was like, this is nice.
She said she's perfecting it. Okay.
Right.
But starting from not perfection. Yeah.
Okay. And like me and Katie don't even listen to. We have some overlap with our taste in music, but like the fact that there are some composers that we're both like we're good. Like, I don't know. Like, it's not even like we're like, we may seem like super in sync, but when it comes to music, there's some deviation there for sure.
So Dalanie, who are you listening to on the classical side of things? If you just decide you feel like listening to classical music?
My taste in classical music is really heavily dependent on like what I have played. So it's like I'm trying to branch out. So I listen to a lot of bass music, which I've tried to phase myself out of because it's actually just not like what Katie was saying about like being in classical music and then just like taking a step back from it. I noticed that listening to music from my instrument was like not good for me mentally because it creates like all these expectations and why don't I sound like that and that sort of thing. But I do really love some music that was written for bass, and I feel like it's very underrated because people they see bass and they don't think that's an instrument that can sound as beautiful as it actually can. Yeah. So I do listen to like a lot of Bottesini. What else? I'm listening to a lot of Tchaikovsky right now just because of playing Czech 6.
Sure. Kusevitsky, maybe. That's the name that comes to mind for me in bass,
Kusevitsky, but yeah, on the classical side of things, I also like chamber music a lot, and I try to seek out chamber music for bass, because that's kind of a unique sound. So I just recently started listening to the Shulov Trio for flute, viola, and bass.
You ain't mentioned a black composer yet.
Okay. Oh. No, but you know what? Okay, but here I'm planning my recital, and I want the second half at least to all be black composers. So I am looking into trying to find the music for the Samuel Coleridge Taylor nonet.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, and then also there's another composer, Nabate Isles, he's probably in his 40s. He went to Eastman and he wrote a piece for my teacher dedicated to him. So that is also something I'm considering being on my recital too. So that is something I am like actively seeking out more Black composers, trying to like maybe request some of that music to be bought by our school so that we can have that, because we did have that conversation, I think, when we were in Tennessee. Like we say we cannot say all this stuff on the mics and then like not do, like, and then I just don't play any music by Black composers and I don't seek it out.
Yeah.
So,
and you're touching on something interesting, because the challenge that I feel in my radio job, you know, not the podcast but the radio, is people knowing who I am and maybe even listening to Trilloquy and not being able to hear, you know, that life's work, that effort. In the music that I'm presenting. I'm sure you oftentimes feel a similar way, you know, that 14th or 15th time you have to talk about, you know, a Boccherini symphony or something.
To be safe, that has tapered off.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. And no shade to anybody. I'm just speaking my truth. Okay.
I'm saying, all I'm saying is I haven't had to do that recently.
Okay.
So.
All right.
The playlist is changing a lot. It's,
and I appreciate, and it's not just about personal taste. It's about you know, really presenting classical music, presenting the art form for the quote unquote diversity that it is. I'm starting to hate that word, but you know, classical music is so broad and so colorful, and we spend so much energy just on these few folks. Katie, what about you? Who are you listening to on the classical side when you just feel like listening to something classical?
So right now, I think I spoke a little bit about this on Classically Black. So when I went to Berlin and to see the Berlin Phil, they were playing one of my favorite symphonies, but I forgot it was one of my favorite symphonies. I was kind of like, I can't go to Berlin and not go see the Berlin Phil. And they were playing Sibelius one of the night that I was there, and I was like, what the heck? I forgot I love this symphony so much. So when I realized, like, because I said, like, I kind of went through a phase where, like, I wasn't listening to classical music because, you know, I went through a little thing with my viola. We weren't really being on the best terms.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I think we're slowly making our way back. So,
Now starting to talk again.
Mainly because we have to talk. But so I'm really been into, I really like loud, bombastic symphonies. They don't have to be nothing too crazy, just like loud. I really like that. So I've been listening to like a lot of Sibelius, a lot of Bruckner. I just like that, just like simple but just like loud type of stuff. I feel Bruckner's like low key slept on. I know all his symphonies sound the same, but that's not the point. And then I listen to what I play, because I'm trying to transition out that conservatory mindset, but I'm still kind of there. So I've been listening to a lot of Lillian Fuchs. She wrote a lot of viola etudes that are actually really beautiful. I just played one on an audition. They asked for a piece on a company that wasn't by Bach, and I was like, bet, got you. Because I feel like as violas we just don't play her enough, you know, especially like we hound Bach, but it's like she wrote all of these characteristic etudes and that really serve almost the same purpose. So yeah, a lot of Lillian Fuchs right now, and then I'm just coming off of a Hailstork kick, because I did a presentation on him. I really like him a lot. Like he a true champion in the viola, you know. So that's kind of what's in my rotation right now.
Yeah, and Hailstork wrote a fair amount of really nice bassoon music as well. Yeah, shout out to him, Adolphus Hailstork. But you just mentioned you're in Berlin. You know, a little humble brag. What were you doing over there?
That was
just passing through, right?
That was a while ago.
Oh, and you were all in Prague and stuff. All this
Anybody was in
travel.
Prague. There was no one in Prague. I did a presentation on Hailstork at the International Viola Congress in Poland.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so I just took I flew. It was easy for me to fly into Berlin, and then I took a train to Poland.
How was that conversation received over there?
It was great, actually. A lot of people were like, one lady came up to me. She was like, "You should submit this to the AVS for our journal, the American Viola Society Journal." And someone from the Netherlands came up to me, and they were like, "I didn't even know this was still a problem, like with race and like how this is not being programmed." I'm like, "Yo, it is."
That's interesting though, because
yeah.
I wonder how many of those folks from the Netherlands can, you know, name more than 2 or 3 Black composers.
That's the
you know,
thing.
It's so difficult. Like when I was saying,
folks here for that matter.
Yeah, like that. That's why I've been trying so actively to branch out, because I'm like, I listen to what I play, and that is such like who controls what I play? I mostly don't, to be honest. And like my recital was one of the things that I actually can control, and I'm lucky to have a teacher who, when we sat down to talk about my recital, he was like, we basically almost said it at the exact same time. He was like, I like just him knowing me, he was like, I knew that was something that you would want to do, and like I'm here for it, and he gave me the suggestions that that he knew of, and the piece that was written for him, which I hope to be able to play. But I mean, it's just difficult when you, especially as a student, when you have like so little control over what you play, and also over just acquiring music. We were just talking about how difficult it is to get music by Black composers.
Yeah.
Sometimes so many people went unpublished, their stuff was lost, just thrown about, who knows?
Yeah, thrown away even,
Thrown away,
that the music that
yeah.
we'll never know about, the composers will never know
know.
about.
Yeah.
But when you talk about not really choosing what you perform, Scott, again, that's reminding me of our jobs. I'll pull the curtain back a little bit. We have music programmers that really put our playlists together, and I will shoot them a little bail and say that they definitely have us in mind. What we're trying to do. As we kind of alluded to before, the playlists are starting to look a lot more colorful because I went in there throwing a little hissy fit about it. But
Yeah, and there's been some change even at Eastman, not with the ensembles,
At
because
all.
we're playing.
Probably won't
We played Dvorak's 8 for I think twice within 3 years.
You told me that.
Why?
My first year at Eastman was your first year, and they paid the boys like 8 that year.
In the house, but there has been some change in the theory curriculum with they make their own anthologies, and there are I just learned a Samuel Coleridge Taylor song for a theory assignment. They're like really trying to diversify the types of music that they present us with, at least from a pedagogical standpoint. So.
And I'm sure, the Eastman School of Music is such a hallowed institution. It must kind of feel daunting. Katie, you're not there anymore, but it must feel
acquired.
or must have felt daunting to try to challenge these norms that are for all intents and purposes, celebrated across the country and around the world. They don't just let anybody into the Eastman School of Music, and I'm sure that there are certain aspects of that institution that they just really protect and don't want to. And I'm not trying to have y'all, trash the school or whatever, but it just must be. Again, it must be or must have been a challenge to really question and call foul on practices that have been going on for decades and decades.
Yeah.
I mean, well, when it comes to recital stuff, my teacher was Black, so we were both so he was like, you could pick the George Walker Viola Sonata, you could pick Hail Story, which one you pick?
Yeah.
So that was just what it was. But I will say, one thing is really frustrating at Eastman. I can't even just put it on Eastman. It's like what's happening in classical music now. I was telling Dalanie, it seems like programming composers of color is just like a thing you do, a little sprinkling on top to make people happy, make the girls happy so they could say that we did it and then we move on. Because a certain top tier orchestra released their you're so messy. Released their season preview for 2021, and none of their highlights were Black composers.
Wow.
And I was like, none of, and then it was I forgot what the piece was. I'm like, but this is not a highlight. Y'all do it every year. It's like some Beethoven symphony. I'm like, y'all, but the year before that, y'all had Florence Price. So it's like, y'all, we did it last year, so we good, right? And I'm not saying it was, to be fair, it was, this orchestra is renowned enough that they're playing a new what's it called? A new cycle every week. You know what I'm saying? So their highlights don't dictate what every concert is going to be. That's not what I'm saying. But it's the fact that none of y'all, the whole season wasn't. It's it's like doing a diversity fellowship program, not caring about the actual fellows that are in your program, just doing it so you can get tax money for it.
Sure.
It's like a sprinkling on top. We did performance prize, and then y'all do the same people. It's like y'all either do. I never see a Coleridge Taylor something premiered. None of his overtures are ever premiered. It's y'all either do some Florence Price symphony, the same 1 or 3, or you do Hailstock American Port of Call, and that's all y'all do.
Afro-American Symphony.
Or Afro-American Symphony. Those 3 pieces.
And not that those aren't very important pieces of music,
course.
but there is so much more.
Because you would never hear me drag Hailstork. I stand him. But it's he wrote other pieces besides American Port of Call.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But it's that's all you see. Because it's let's just throw it in there. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
So I can't even really say much about Eastman. I can, because I feel like... But I just feel like they're kind of just mimicking what everybody else is doing. You can't even really fault the institution for doing that. And I will say, in the same breath, I've said learning excerpts. I get angry when there's a different off the string piece when we have Mendelssohn Scherzo.
Sure.
I'm always like, why do we have to learn this when we have Mendelssohn Scherzo? Like, there's literally already something for it. Like, what kind of flex are y'all trying to have making me learn music that already serves its purpose?
Yeah.
But how great would it be if a black composer was on an excerpt list? But y'all don't want to do that.
And you're also touching on, again, those power structures. So you mentioned a certain orchestra, you kind of...
I would never say what
you're very careful about the ways that you refer to the Eastman School of Music. And, for me, it is so frustrating to see something that is inequitable, to see programming practices or performance practices that I don't feel includes me, and for me to feel a sort of guilt or feel a sort of apprehension about calling it out. For me, that's probably more frustrating than the lack of blackness we see in classical music and classical music programming.
I mean, I will say, like, this certain orchestra, okay, it's going to reveal it, but this certain orchestra was the first to premiere Florence Price's Symphony. So wouldn't that be a highlight to do it 200 years later? That's not a highlight?
All right, so we're talking about Chicago, right? For everybody who don't know.
Katie's like, I'm not gonna say it, but
I mean, that would be a highlight to me. It's like it's like 200 years later. Wait, math. Okay, it's like 200 years later. This symphony that you premiered, you're gonna do it again. That is a highlight,
right?
But y'all don't want to do that. It's like, let's just do Beethoven 7 again. Like, we get it. It's good. I also stand the second movement. But it's like, that would be a highlight. That is something that would showcase something that this is something I really care about. Like, we not just trying to, and I'm not saying that's what they're doing. I don't know anybody over there.
Sure,
but
yeah.
I'm just saying, like, to really show that you really have an interest in this thing. That's how you do stuff. It's like, how can we highlight something else? You know what I'm saying? Or go down near to Arkansas and talk to the Florence Price people and see if they can release one more thing for us.
Sure.
Because for whatever reason, they just don't want to. But
so, do you two think that it's more equitable to have pieces by black composers all throughout the season, or shows that are dedicated to those composers?
both.
Would you rather go to the all black concert or just go to a concert and see black music on it?
I'd rather go to a concert and see black music on it. I'd want to do both, honestly.
Me too,
yeah, I'd want to do both. But I would want it to be like not just like a special occasion, you know?
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
See, y'all girls love February, don't you?
Right. Because like I said, like me and Katie were just talking about this. I'm a classical musician, but nothing is drawing me into the concert hall besides I have to be there to play. Like that's it. I'm like, I can listen to Beethoven 5 on my couch. Like, why would I go to hear y'all do it for the trillionth time?
And that's one of the realizations that I kind of faced when I got off the stage in an official capacity and went more into the world of media. Why am I gonna spend the little bit of free time I have, sitting in a seat next to folks side-eyeing me because I'm wearing Timbs, and again, hearing Beethoven 5, Beethoven 6 again, or whatever. And I know, and orchestras do much more
People
than
really
that.
play Beethoven 6? I'm sorry. I just didn't know.
Oh, people play the pastoral. They do it. They do it.
You said that first, and I was like, I stopped you. Yeah, you were like, also people play Beethoven 6? I'm sorry.
I've never heard Beethoven 6.
Oh, no, it's fine. But yeah, Dalanie, I definitely agree, and you're hitting on something. Why should we spend not only that money, but that time, hearing what, like you said, what we can hear on YouTube or what we can hear wherever else. I don't know.
I don't have money to just give away, so.
I mean, but it's time to be a production. You want what kind of thing you want? You want some type of overture, some type of new piece, intermission, second half.
Yeah.
Bet. Samuel Coleridge Taylor, Jennifer Higdon, intermission, Mahler 5. It's like that simple. It's not even like, we need a black thing. What are we gonna do? It's not even that. It's like,
so what do you say? What do you say to the people though that say, well, the reason why they play Beethoven over and over, or that we're hearing Sibelius, whatever it is, it's because it's superior. Okay, so that's it. Right.
What do I say?
No, wait. Yeah, I want to get it. I want to get it.
I don't say anything else to do.
there's nothing else to say. Superior.
No, I want to share it with you. There's a guy that used to listen when I was on overnight. There's a guy that would write in from Vienna, and he would say, and I would play something that was, a little bit outside of what you would consider
the canon,
usual on our playlist. And he would write something like, I can certainly see why the Brahms is better, things like that. So seriously, if you're in an elevator, let's say, okay, do you just disengage? What would you say to try to get them to change their mind?
I honestly don't feel like I would. I don't know. I feel like I don't have nothing else to say to you. But if I'm taking a step back, I feel like realistically, people just need to question, like, why do you think that's superior? Like, not just, like, I feel like they would be like, well, because I like it better. But I'm like, no,
but that don't make it better.
Yeah, exactly. There are reasons why you see that music as superior. Because at some point, there's a certain group of people that decided what classical music should sound like and what should be considered classical music. So we use those rules to determine what classical music is. And so there's a reason why you hear that and you're like, oh, but it's better because it has this. And I'm like, but you can't explain that. You just say because it is, and because it's always been that way. But that doesn't make it right.
So how do y'all define classical music?
Okay. Didn't we look this up? Because we went down a rabbit hole planning for this thing.
Yeah.
Classical music is an art form by which requires. You use both of those? Require my master's degree. Don't feel me now.
Yeah, come on, masters.
It's an art
I'll let you
form-
take this one.
An art form that is built on theory. And I feel like while a lot of music is, the way classical music doesn't function without it. Like you could do something wrong in church and it still sounds good. But I feel like you hear put a parallel fifth. But then it's like, there are classical composers that do use parallel fifths to piss people off, right? But it's like classical music is rooted in a theory that people then manipulate and play around with in a way that maybe other music is not so much. It's not as rigid.
Yeah, I agree with that to a point, but I also can't help but to think about like folk traditions and all. Let's bring up my favorite Brahms. Not really my favorite, but he wrote all of those Hungarian dances. Based on Hungarian folk tunes. And that's no one would argue that that's not classical music, but what he wrote it off of was folk music. I don't know. And I also think about Scott. We bring up Nirmala a lot. We had we talked about Indian classical music on one opus, and she kept referring to what she was doing as South Indian classical music. And it wasn't a violin nowhere in sight. Neither was there a white composer involved. If you want to talk about the thousands-year tradition in China, even if you want to bring it back to the United States, I feel like Negro spirituals are as classical as anything else. Probably among the most classic of American music.
Because I feel like what you said about Brahms' Hungarian dance, like he was able to use those influences from those folk songs, and they were like, oh yeah, this is classical music, but let you throw a Negro spiritual in there, and then all of a sudden it's to this, it's to that,
it's too ethnic,
right? So
and again, I'm not asking y'all to throw anybody under the bus, but are those things that you've actually experienced? People not really respecting the Negro spiritual. I'm just, as an example, not respecting the Negro spiritual as much as they respect the Hungarian dance, even though those are both folk-based bits of classical music.
I'd say the way both of those things are treated within classical music and within the classical music canon, that's the message that it sends to me. That's what I would say. Like X orchestra doesn't have to release a statement saying we don't play Negro spiritual. Like they don't have to say it. You guys have showed us this time and time again. It's like, what else are we supposed to think?
That's very heavy. You're right. Actions do speak louder than words. And if a certain orchestra that is somewhere that we don't know about, has released their highlights and there's no blackness or brownness in it, that is a message that rings loud and clear to me. And I think that same message rings loud and clear when you're talking about radio programming. And I'm very thankful to have helped influence a bit of change on that front. But we really have to start being more active. You know, I feel like in the past 5-10 years, the conversation has become very common, but the action is still not very common. And it's getting frustrating for me, quite frankly.
Especially when you're looking in the face of an institution that has like so many resources at their disposal. It's like you have no excuse.
Yeah.
Like you just have no excuse. And I feel like they just don't have people in the spaces telling them like, hey, we should probably move the needle on this a little bit. Like Katie and I have talked time and time again about things that like that wouldn't happen if y'all had somebody else in the room.
Yeah, if you had a person of color in the room and in charge, because that's the difference. You could hire as many black people as you want.
Yeah, your whole team of black interns.
Your whole team of black people. If white people making decisions, it's like it's gonna stay the same. So it's like if you I feel like if you had a black person in there and you put out like this is what we think for the season, and the black person go through it, and I'm like, y'all, not one of these people, you don't have any women composers, you don't have any composers of color, no black composers, whatever. Then it's like I feel people just don't realize that, because like your view of the world is your view of the world, and no one's faulting you for that. That's not what we're saying. But it's like you don't have people of color in charge calling you out. You have people of color making copies and junk, talking about diversity and inclusion. But that's another conversation for another day.
I mean, and you know, that loops back around to the whole conversation of the power structure and how, you know, some people in certain positions cannot, or at least don't feel comfortable saying certain things or calling certain things out because there's more at stake, like you know, your very job, or you know, even the respect you have at that job, or the way you know that you're treated. So you know, how do you think the two of you can sort of incite change in that regard? You know, what do you think you can do as individuals, as black women, to try to push that needle and to get folks not just thinking about this but doing something about it?
It's hard to say, because I feel like there's most people who would click on a show called Classically Black Podcast and keep listening to it are already on our side, you know, like we're preaching to the choir. So it's hard to say. We've done a lot on the other side of things, like trying to bring people into classical music, but I struggle to envision how we could try to change people's minds about classical music in that way that would feel like still true to who we are. Like, because I don't want it to feel like, well, we're like, please program, you know, yeah, it's like I don't know. I'm just not sure how that would look.
You're right. There is an optic behind, you know, sort of begging this institution, please include us. Please put this music in there, you know. Yeah.
And I feel like so one of the things that we've done is just try to hold ourselves accountable in terms of like the type of music that we feature, the type of things that we talk about, and holding ourselves accountable in the sense that like when we go into spaces that are not like Sphinx, that are like totally white spaces, just holding, you know, just not wavering, you know, from that conviction.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Katie?
Honestly, it's hard to say, because thinking about the impact that Classically Black is really hard when you look at our streams and the context. It's like I always say, I always joke around and be like, we used to be sitting in my kitchen, you know? Mm-hmm. But I feel like like what Dalanie said about like holding our ground, I think the more that we speak our minds, the more that we try to reach a broader audience. Delanie's job, some of her colleagues listen to it, and they are people in charge making decisions, you know, in that capacity. So what if other people at that institution started listening as well? So when something like it's time to plan the 2023 season, it's like, you know what, I really did hear something on Classically Black about how they're frustrated about this. I wonder how we can incorporate this in a meaningful way. So I feel like, I know it's annoying, but if we just keep doing what we're doing, I feel like we'll reach the right people and keep making noise about things that matter to us. I mean, black people have been making noise about stuff forever until people started listening. So it's unfortunate, but it's just another thing we have to do.
When you talk about broadening that audience, I can't help but to think about the idea of tokenization, you know, because as we've laid out a few times on Trilloquy, there is a thin line between collaboration and tokenization. Yeah. And for me, I don't know, Scott, I know that it's possible for us to be a little bit more buttoned up and maybe a little bit more accessible to the traditional listener or to the listener who isn't necessarily down with what black folks are talking about, have never heard of the reed or anything like that. But I don't feel like I'm beholden to center that. I feel like I should be able to exist the way I exist. Something else I say all the time. I'm not a tourist of classical music. I'm not new. I came up through the process. I went to music school. I won auditions. So this is as much mine as anyone else's.
Right.
Why should we? Or I won't even say we. Why should I? Why should Katie? Why should Dalanie have to center the experience and the comfort of someone who gets to benefit from an institution that was built with them in mind? It's frustrating for me.
I get that, and I don't have an answer for you. I can tell you that from the radio aspect of it, not only are you dealing with listeners, but we work for a service, and people are there are program directors at stations all around the country that are paying for our content, and we're satisfying them. There's a lot of things that we're working on that are working behind the scenes that we don't see, and I always have to tell I try to come back with you on the radio programming bit that there are some people out there who just like Bach.
And there's nothing wrong with
And
that.
I also like him.
I also like him.
But he's not the only composer.
That's not what I'm saying. Studying broadcasting in graduate school, I got all the management in the back of the house stuff. And you have to serve those people. Yeah. And it is our job as presenters to make that exciting. Okay, that's what I charge myself with. Okay, I've got a Carabini whatever here. What am I going to, how am I, that's what I get paid for, is to connect them to that somehow. So it's that is part of our job. I mean, I know that you came from a gig where you were doing a drive time show. I do think that you're more of a personality. My philosophy is more to stay out of the way. That's it.
And I appreciate that, especially in conversations of race and gender and all that, Scott.
You notice I've been very quiet over here.
No, but we... But I think, and I said this to Joshua Wallerstein when he was on, or I think when I was on his podcast, we don't need to be validated. We don't need white validation, but it's very important for people who, represent more of that tradition to understand some of our concerns and to back us up when the opportunity comes. I think we can't do it by ourselves, as much as we would like to.
I do that. I feel like I do that.
Yeah. Now I'm in my feelings. Now I'm all feeling away. The question that I know I'm gonna get, is, well, what are, from a white person, well, what are we supposed to do? The audience isn't there. I'll speak for our organization. On our service, we have age breakdowns and also race breakdowns. 1% of our listenership is black, exactly 1%, and it's grown on other fronts. Even the Latinx listenership has grown significantly, but that black listenership is just at 1%. And I know that y'all are gonna cover this at the live taping of Classically Black that's coming up as we're taping this. But I guess just as a preview, what do you have to say about getting us more into classical music? I mean, I think it's about visibility for sure, but just the art of listening, the art of putting in some earbuds and listening to something classical. How do you think we can raise that number from 1%?
It's hard to say because I'm not even in that 1%, and I'm in classical music.
Yeah.
Like I said, so I just feel like as a classical musician, I'm searching for something different, and something that me and Katie were talking about, and I think we touched on this a while ago, was just like respecting other art forms as equals to classical music. And I feel like we went through a whole rabbit hole. We were talking about rap, and we were talking about like everything that goes into it, and how it's just so complex, and people just don't see they don't see rap, they don't see R&B, they don't see other forms of music that were pioneered by Black people as classical music made more of an effort to bridge that gap, because it seems like it's just so distant from everything else, then maybe that would bring other Black people in. Because one of the things that we figured out when we did like a mini series when we were called Put Me On, when we were trying to bring people into classical music, is that like people just had so many misconceptions about it. Like they were like, I mean, they think of like old white guy, or like, I don't know, you know, boring or something like that. And then me and Katie would pick something like by a Black composer, and they were like, that sounds like that would be like in a Black movie, or like, is that classical music? You know, like there's just no diversity in like the way classical music sounds in a concert hall. Like it's the same things over and over and over again. So I feel like if people were exposed to classical music that sounds different, that sounds familiar to them in some ways, or even not, because like one of the pieces that we did was like inspired by the Caribbean. You don't have to be from Jamaica or from Cuba to, you know, to connect with that music, or even to be interested in it. But I feel like I don't know. I'm not trying to say that people can't like classical music the way it is, because I like classical music the way it is. You know, I listen to it. But at the same time, it's like, just, if it's not working and if it's not bringing people in, like, you have to try different things, especially because they're available and they're just collecting dust.
Yeah, I know Scott said something about, like, people like what they like. So I think my big thing is, like, incorporating things that they don't know they like yet. So, and those things can be a point of departure to get other groups of people in. So just to use the example of, so let's talk about women composers. Let's switch it up, right? Yeah. So you're gonna do a bunch of Bach, right? But then you're in between it, you'll put Lillian Fuchs, right? So now you have all of these women, and you're like, we're going to play Lillian Fuchs tonight. And all these women you say, like, well, Lillian Fuchs is just a great composer, and da-da-da-da, and XYZ. And then you do some Lillian Fuchs, and then you put Bach, and then you talk about Rebecca Clark. Like, you know, Rebecca Clark had to use, like, a pseudonym because XYZ, and she couldn't write da-da-da. Yep. And now all these women are like, yo, really? And then you put some Bach after that, you put some other stuff after that, and they're like, you know, I kind of like this stuff. It sounds like this. So giving people a point of departure, and then they don't know what they don't like yet. So Black people, because like Dalanie said something, it's like, I don't like Bach's not Black and I like him, you know, but he doesn't have to be Black for me to like him, but I might have gotten there through somewhere else. And then it's like, now other people are listening, like, I wonder what they gonna put on next week, you know? So, and then it might not be any Black people, you know, because slim pickings, but they're tuned in because they were given a point of departure, and I think that's important. I feel like a lot of organizations and a lot of institutions aren't interested and aren't willing to provide a point of departure
because it's just uncomfortable for a lot of people, and to kind of, you know, loop this all back around. The way that we advocate for classical music on our respective podcasts is different than people are used to hearing. People are not used, again, to hearing just loose conversation as it applies to classical music, and it not having been done before, it not being a standard part of the classical music culture, for me, is why I believe it'll work. I think that because it has never been done before, or a few are doing it, that's why I think that is the next place that we have to go. So, you know, we will never be the Reed. We will never be the Joe Budden podcast. We're going to be Trilloquy, and y'all are going to be Classically Black, and we're going to do what we do and present ourselves authentically as members of the classical music community and advocates for it. Yeah. That's my sermon. So
I just feel like, go back to what Dalanie said at first, like the way people view classical music is like, well, Bach and da-da-da, we have to, all this stuff, like all this junk, and it's like, it's just music. Like, I think one thing I really like about Dalanie and I podcast, besides the fact that it's ours, is the fact that, like, we talk very seriously about classical music, and then we joke about classical music, but we take, like, that rigidness away from it. Like, y'all were talking, and I was like, people played Beethoven 6, and it's like, how long have I been playing the viola? 15 years, 16 years? And it's like, duh. Or, like, I was like, Boccherini wrote a symphony? And it's like...
he did.
But people, I mean, I don't even know about that for a reason. But anyway, people, like, put classical music on this pedestal, like it's like this ivory tower, and you wonder why folks ain't coming to y'all concerts. Like it just doesn't make sense. It's like you have to know everything. You have to know everything about everything. You have to know composers' dates. You have to know how many symphonies this person wrote and all this other stuff just to listen to classical music. And that's why people just don't really even want to bother with it, because you can turn on DaBaby and and he's talking about guns and money. Like, oh,
some bop in it.
Right. It's like you could turn on Beyonce, you understand it. You could turn on Frank Sinatra and understand what he's talking about. But it's like classical music, you have to like pass some type of like pretest to do it. It's like it's really just not all of that. Because people, these same operas that you get mad at people for texting during and kids crying during. Are you making fun of me? During. It's during. The same operas that y'all get mad at people for doing these things and going to the bathroom in the middle of an aria. It's like people were throwing popcorn and talking and having
sleeping and like all kind of stuff,
all the smells and stuff. Okay. Like during the premiere,
she said all the smells.
Come on, how often were they showering? We are very far off from the shower,
right? From the modern shower,
from changing bathwater every week.
I mean, we're far off from washing our legs today in 2020. So
some of them folks anyway. But everyone in this room washes his or her legs.
Because I'm like, let's not act like Haydn didn't write a symphony specifically because people could not stay awake. You know, like. Right. But I feel like I try to advocate for classical music, which this is not a great example of advocating for it, but it's an example of me trying to incorporate it in regular things. So like I try to have other interests outside of classical music.
Same.
I take other classes in linguistics and in African American studies. So I have an African American studies class called Blackness and Popular Culture. And for for an assignment, it's an optional assignment that you can do. You create a soundtrack based off of the themes for that week. So the theme for that week was blackface, minstrelsy, and the black body. So I'm like, I'm gonna create a soundtrack that has a mix of like, I had pop on there, I had R&B, I had classical, I had opera, I had film music, and like, I was like, I don't think that this is something that has been done before in this class. And my teacher was like, wow, like this is not these pieces that don't have words in them. Like I analyzed them in the same way that I did a Beyonce song and of course I have a Nicki Minaj song, a Lil Kim song, Okay, I know how you feel about Nicki Minaj.
We're not going to hate on Nicki in here now.
You know what? I like you, Garrett, so I'm just keep my mouth shut.
But I'm like, I want to bring these pieces into a space that they're not normally thought about, because one of the first things that we said in that our teacher said in that class, like we were talking about what popular culture is, and one of the first things that she did was have people define what high culture was. And of course, one of the first things people said, going to the opera, going to the symphony. And I'm like, and this is a class where every single person in this class, except for one, and there's about probably 20-something people, are black.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I've never been in a college course where everybody's black. Oof. Like, but I'm like, all these black people are like, yeah, going to the opera, high culture, like that's fancy, that's
So you stood up and said, wait a minute.
Yeah, so that was like sort of my way of like, but you can draw connections between like classical music and things that that composers were writing and things that are going on now, and especially because like a lot of this music was popular culture at the time. Right. Like these composers were huge in their day. A lot of them. So yeah, I mean, that was like sort of my way of bringing it into a space that was like not centered around classical music, obviously didn't have like any, I guess, like an understanding of it in that way. Yeah. And it was also interesting for me as a music student to analyze classical music, but not really analyze it, because I'm not writing this for a music professor, so I can't be like, in the cadence and this thing, because she'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, yeah.
Try modular block.
Yeah. She'd be like, what are you talking about? So, but I was able to explain like how Debussy has a couple of pieces that are extremely racist.
Honestly, and can we cancel him for racist?
He was on there twice for some of his racist stuff that was like,
he shot his wife. Like, it's just so
no,
much.
she shot herself.
Oh, my bad.
But then he left her for dead. So, but anyway,
but his other girl is a mess.
I know. Debussy ain't no good. I know.
Yeah,
I
he's
know.
trifling.
But again, like, but the music just, I'm like,
and for also it doesn't. So it's right there. Yeah, just what?
I can't.
I don't even know if I want to go down this rabbit hole, but we are good about not being careful about the legacies of certain black people who are dead, you know. But when it comes to these composers, if we say certain things that sort of disrupt or challenge their huge legacies, that's a problem. You know, I got a lot of angry emails early one morning when I had something by Handel on my playlist, and I talked about how he couldn't have written any of this if he hadn't made the money he made investing in the transatlantic slave trade.
I know they were mad.
And they were
they
big
can stay that
mad.
way.
But there were a couple people who, you know, appreciated that. And I think podcasts like ours are for those people, you know, looking to discover, looking to, you know, learn something and get a perspective on this art form and these composers that you don't get at the conservatory, that you don't get at the
Certainly
in the
not going to get at
textbook.
the concert hall.
Right. Oh, yeah, definitely not that. But you're going to get it from Garrett and Scott and Katie and Dalanie.
I mean, no shade, but like, it doesn't really matter what these men do across genres. I mean, if you want to have that in common, Debussy could have had 20 wives, and and he would still be programmed on every. Like, I remember my fave, unfortunately, was arrested. DaBaby was arrested 2-3 weeks ago for something that he didn't do, and okay, he did it, but whatever.
But it wasn't his fault, though.
I mean, it wasn't
It
his
really
fault.
wasn't. They should have just paid him.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, but
okay.
the apple juice is a little lot. Anyway,
Yeah.
so he was arrested, and people in the comments like, he's just starting off, like, this is going to destroy his career. And I'm like, no, it's not. And the next week, he was at the Grammys. It's like, men can do, but they can do whatever.
there.
It's like, who else? Wagner? Y'all love Wagner. You know what I'm saying? And I can't say, like, freaking learning the master singers, like, that over just slaps. And I hate that I like it.
Yeah.
But it's like, it doesn't matter what he does. It's like, so if that brings anyone some comfort, it's like, Debussy's not going anywhere. DaBaby's not going anywhere. Offset. It's like across genres, like, men can do whatever. So we can drag Debussy from here to Kingdom Come. It's like, it doesn't matter. You're still gonna stream. What did he write? I don't even know what he wrote.
Lemaire.
That terrible flute harp, whatever that was, that festival we went to.
We just throwing everybody under the bus today. So it sounds like that, you know, there are specific. Well, I know that there are challenges specific to women and specific to black women today in classical music, but you feel like a lot of the women composers of decades past were under more scrutiny than their male counterparts.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of women couldn't even use their real names.
Sure.
So, Rebecca Clark won. I don't want to get lying, but I know her and Ernest Block were on the same competition for something, and I think he came in second. I should fact check this since all these people don't listen to this. But he came in second, and Rebecca Clark won, and they were like, "Ain't no way she won. She a woman." And I was just like, "Cause her sonata's better." Block, like, come on, Block. I mean, he wrote some stuff, but Block.
Yeah. He got a couple violin concertos that are nice to hear,
Yeah,
like to listen to.
He is dense. But
That Shlomo piece that he got, I was just.
he's an English composer, right?
Yeah,
Ernst
your fave.
Bloch?
Ernest Block?
I'm forgetting Scott.
He's not English.
Yeah,
not?
I didn't
Oh,
think
no,
he was
he's-
English.
German.
Girl.
Sorry, you heard that? I was trying to think.
Anyway, he was a composer. Well, let's sort of wrap up. So, if there is, there's somebody listening right now who is saying,
Thank you.
Oh, well, yes, thank you.
Let's say you
Yeah,
made it
first of
through
all,
this.
first and foremost.
The way your audience sounds, I feel like half of them going. So thank you, sis.
Angry emails and stuff.
Right.
Oh gosh.
Forward some, I want to say.
No, we got a lot of good listeners on the radio and on the podcast. So shout
Don't
out to
release,
them.
don't release our email address.
Right.
It's about to be spicy in there for this.
No, but if there's someone listening right now who's like, okay, well, you're talking a big game, but who do you really want us to be listening to? Who should we be listening to? How do you respond to that? Who's a composer, or maybe even what's a piece of music that you would suggest to someone to check out to sort of broaden their horizons on what classical music is?
Oh, in general?
Yeah.
Sibelius won.
You really
Really?
love.
Are you kidding?
How is that different? How is that different
Yeah, I've
than
never heard
what's
Sibelius
out there?
one, so.
Then what's out there?
Yeah.
Okay, first of all, Sibelius is slept on. I think so. And also,
Scott loves Sibelius.
I'm a big fan.
but I'm not a fan of his violin concerto, honestly. I
That's
just, I just
fine.
don't get the hype. But like that piece, I think encapsulates everything beautiful about classical music.
Okay, so I'm gonna
Like
listen to
exciting
Sibelius one.
opening, you will literally cry at the second movement, third movement, bum 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 ba dun dun. Listen,
Yep.
Oh, that's Sibelius one. Okay, yeah, I know that.
like, I mean, slaps through and through. Like, I think that's probably my favorite piece
Sibelius one.
ever.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna spend some
Ever?
time with it.
Yeah, I think it's my favorite piece ever.
All right,
The
wow.
second movement?
Okay.
Yo, he did that.
All right.
I think that could challenge. But okay, if you took the complexity out of Brahms, like, I think it could challenge Brahms. It could challenge that second movement. We're talking about second movements across the board. Can challenge Chaik, my fave. Like that second movement. Challenge.
Okay,
I'm gonna have to listen.
so right now, if you're listening,
But
go
now
to.
I overhyped it, so now it's gonna be like,
Right, I'm be like, this
Go
is what
to-
you're talking about.
But anyway, go to YouTube and type Sibelius Symphony No. 1, Movement 2.
Oh, I forgot. I think there's a recording of Gergiev conducting, which that.
Oh, so you're here for Gergiev.
Gergiev,
Okay.
I love Gergiev.
Yeah.
It's
All
one
right,
of the
shout out
most
to Maestro
interesting.
Gergiev.
One of the most interesting conductors out there.
Delaney, what about you? What is your go listen to this right now piece of classical music?
It's a hard question.
Yes, especially I'm a Libra, so I'm very like I'm not usually like buying into like astrology, but like that part jumps out. I'm very indecisive. I don't like definitive statements, but well, when it comes to a lot of things, but
Sure.
yeah, this is one thing Katie makes fun of me for. So there's this album that I listen to. So I'm gonna give an album called Troubadour Blue, by a composer Nils Boltman, and it has some interesting stuff on it. Katie makes fun of me because there's these 10 viola duets. She's like, "Why do you listen to this?" But
I didn't even know about them.
yeah, it's fairly new music. But there's a cello suite on there. There's 10 viola duets. It's a piece for solo viola and a piece for viola and didgeridoo, which is very interesting.
Oh, I think you
Yeah.
mentioned this last time you were on Trilloquy, actually.
Yeah, maybe.
I remember you talking about this didgeridoo.
Hey, Katie,
So
I'm
this has been your
telling you.
fave for a year at least.
Yeah, because and I found it on Pandora. Katie also makes fun of me for listening to Pandora still.
You don't even have Pandora Premium, so you have
Okay.
to wait through the ads.
Okay, I still listen to Pandora, and that's what,
For businesses that are out, that don't even exist anymore.
wow. I might as well ride on a freaking horse to go listen to it. Like, okay.
I'll send you a carrier pigeon.
What's that thing with the what's it called? The thing to crank up.
See, we can't even talk.
The
A
hurdy-gurdy.
phonograph?
Phonograph.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Still on that.
All right.
Plug your
Anyway.
phone.
Anyway, yeah, but I found it through Pandora, which I was just talking to Katie about this. Listening to classical music on Pandora is usually a flop because of like it can't tell the difference between like different symphonies recording different things.
Sure.
So like Lenosa de Figaro Overture was played 3 times within an hour, and I was
Yeah.
like, okay, I love it, but come on,
Yeah.
you know.
I got it the first time.
Yeah, like we get it. Da-da-da-da. Yeah, but yeah, that would be my pick. It
All
has
right.
some really weird, some quirky stuff, but also some really beautiful things. And I like new music to an extent. So, and I also think it's more fun to play than to listen to for me. But that is a album that I think is really like it has a lot of different sounds and a lot of it's a wide spectrum of
Okay,
things. On
and
that
give us the
album.
name of that album again.
Troubadour Blue.
Troubadour
by
Blue.
Nils Boltman.
All right, so I got to listen to Sibelius 1 and I got to listen to Troubadour Blue. I'm not gonna. Sibelius is.
Tread carefully.
I'm gonna give it a try.
You
So
like
I'm gonna
Sibelius?
practice what I preach. You know, you say you can get into new music. New music is my bag. Sometimes I feel like if it was written before the year 2000, who cares? You know.
Whoa.
Like I am
It
the I am
depends what it
new
is,
music.
Gary.
New
It
music.
depends
You know.
because
Because that dumb junk is like not it.
it depends. Like me and Katie, what's a joke? We said something about like concerto for orchestra and 3 half-eaten blueberry muffins. Like it'd be like somebody did this one. It was like sonata for 3 chairs. I'm like, a chair is not an instrument. Like I'm sorry, it's not. And it was like the chairs were moving and one of them was married to the other one. I'm like, you're taking it too far. It's too much.
Yeah, the folks can stretch, but there's
Yeah,
definitely
but,
some.
yeah.
You know
There
what's
are
coming
some-
up?
yeah.
There's definitely some-
what's coming to mind now are the stuff that Terrence Blanchard is doing.
Yeah,
and,
there's a lot of great stuff.
Michael Abels, two black
Yeah.
composers right off beat right there. Earlier in this conversation, Katie, you mentioned Jennifer Higdon. I love what
Yeah, she's
what
great.
she's doing.
I love
And
her.
she has a great viola sonata, viola concerto.
Let me find out.
You know,
I had no idea.
yeah, that third movement is kind of. It you get into the groove
I'll
with
tell
it.
y'all Viola Girl something. Listen, Bartok did too much, and I feel like now y'all just want to do a lot. But I'll take a listen.
Oh, I love that Bartok viola concerto too. You don't care for that?
I like Bartok.
I love Bartok in general, but that viola concerto is great too.
Yeah, no, it's really beautiful. I don't. You like Walton better or Bartok?
Probably the Bartok, but Bartok was, he didn't care what y'all thought.
Right, he
so.
shook the table.
Yeah.
So. But when I got into new music ensemble, when I saw those little black square notes that said "play whatever note you want," I was like, "This is my type of beat." Because I'll be doing that anyway.
Oh, you wasn't like the SpongeBob. All right, I'ma head out.
No, I was like, okay, play whatever notes I want. Period.
But it depends on the music. Like, I'm not like closed off to new music by any means, but like, because a lot of the new music. But so maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm the problem, because if it sounds like something I could get down to, I'm like, okay, like. What's that? The 7 last words of the
Unarmed, yeah, Joel Thompson, yeah. That was the first time I was in the concert hall crying over something.
I played in a really powerful concert over the summer where it was like there was a short film that won this HBO competition, and we played the music for it, and it was it was about gun violence and that sort of thing, and they had all these mothers that were the mothers of victims of gun violence and police brutality stand up, and in white. We were in Washington Concert Hall, and like the orchestra was black, and I lost it. I was like, I can't do, I'm sensitive. I cry real easily, but it was just too much, and it was just like that's a concert I love playing every year with the Inner City Youth Orchestra of Los Angeles. We did the Aretha Franklin tribute. It was just like a black experience on Walt Disney Concert Hall stage. Like it's powerful every time.
Yeah, I forgot you're in LA. Yeah, shout out to LA. Say hey to Slauson next time you're at home. I feel like I'm a preacher right now. Every 10 minutes I'm saying we're gonna wrap up, but for real now. So
yeah, we'll see.
Katie, you graduated from the Eastman School of Music. What are you doing these days? What are you kind of looking forward to? What's going on?
Just I'm just kidding. So I took a year off, and I'm teaching right now in Rochester. I'm really actually enjoying the teaching that I'm doing, because I do a lot of high poverty. After school type stuff. Not all of my teaching is high poverty, actually, because one's a private school. But nevertheless, I really enjoy that type of teaching, because I started off with public school and it just really wasn't my jam. So I'm really liking that right now. And I'm taking a host of auditions. I've cast my net pretty far, so I'll see where I land. I think I didn't. It's not like I didn't take it seriously last year, but I kind of was like. I think I was instructed and advised to just like keep it small. Yeah. But I didn't really like my options. So now it's just like, I got time. So kind of. So I'm like, I have a whole bunch of stuff. So I'll see what I'm doing. I'm looking at some faculty positions, school. So we'll see. But I'm trying to get out of Rochester. Rochester's great. Yeah. But I want to keep going.
Professor Brown.
I was just about to say Professor Brown.
We'll see. So
Dr. Brown.
Doctor.
Yeah.
We'll see. But I want to play, so okay. I'm leaning more heavily towards a school. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Dalanie, so is this your last year at Eastman, or what's going on?
Kind of, yeah. So I took a semester off from school,
good
the
for
fall
you.
semester. Yeah, so I have to make it up, so I will graduate in the fall.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then you got any thoughts about what's happening after that?
Okay. I have a high school diploma, so let's go.
I'm sorry.
I dabbled in the arts admin world while I was away from school.
Oh yeah, you sure did, yeah.
But I also dabbled in an institution with tons of money, and like so it was, I'm curious as to how what I learned there will translate to smaller organizations, and but I wouldn't be opposed to that. I'm thinking about another performance degree, but honestly, it's not looking great for that. To be honest, so I'm kind of I don't know.
And then, of course, folks can check out Classically Black on whatever podcast platform. Correct.
Wherever you listen to podcasts, you will find us.
Just search Classically Black
on Pandora. They never told us, but we're on there too. Yeah. So I gotta add that to.
Are we on Pandora? We need.
What's Pandora?
Okay, that means we need to get on Pandora.
Just apply and then wait 3 months and just search your name and see.
Yeah.
3 months?
No, because they never got back to us. And then we were searching something for the show, classical music, and then I scrolled, I was like, what the heck? Like, it was our podcast. I was like, okay. And it was like updated too.
Well, I will personally say that I'm definitely a fan of Classically Black. I think the work that the two of you are doing sort of validates the work we're doing. As we sort of began by saying, we are under a certain set of rules and regulations and limitations. So, to see the two of you spending your free time, really advocating for classical music in the way that you want to do it, I love it. I think it's phenomenal, and I hope that more of it can happen, and there can be fewer doubts around dealing with classical music in a laid back, non-serious way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I've listened to Trilloquy. I'm like, oh, y'all so smart. Like, y'all are like,
mad smart.
Right, what I would like to do when I'm like in front of people that might hire me someday. You know what I mean? Like,
because it's like a bleak for me. So
because I'm like, people be like, you guys are just so. I'm like, we would just be on these mics talking.
I mean,
like,
after that CSO thing, we're gonna see what's gonna happen.
Yeah. We'll see what Chicago got to say to us after this come out.
I mean, why didn't say nothing bad? I mean, if you're mad about it, that's the problem.
That's not true. It's the shoe fits for free.
I mean.
All right. Anyway, you got anything else to say, Scott?
Just send me an email with what you want cut out, ladies.
Are we finished or are we done?
Yep.
All right. Thanks y'all for listening.